I'd like to welcome everyone to the Dairy XNet Public Perception of Dairy Farms webinar today. We have a co-host of this webinar today being the National Association of County Agriculture Agents, and we thank them for their co-sponsorship and for helping us promote this program. For those of you on this program, realize that if you are an ARPIS member and need CEUs for ARPIS, that ARPIS has agreed to allow one CEU for attending this particular webinar, so that you are eligible for that CEU. I'd like to welcome everyone today. We are going to have a webinar on public perception of dairy farms, and we have 3 speakers lined up. Faith Cullens is going to talk about her program that is on breakfast on the farm. Faith is a dairy educator from Michigan State. Her program basically is centered in the center of the state. She began her job in 2008, and one of the things that she did very early on is she asked her dairy producers what they wanted her to do. And their comments came back telling her, tell the people the truth about what we are doing here on the farm. So together with the Farm Bureau, local Farm Bureau, she put together an educational event to bring people on a working farm, and this program was entitled Breakfast on the Farm. And Faith is with us today to talk about this program and the implications that it had in her state. With that, Faith?
Thank you. As she said, I'm a dairy educator with MSU Extension. In 2009, I had spearheaded a project that we titled Breakfast on the Farm. Again, this came about after getting out in the country, discussing my new role with several dairy producers, and the producers shared with me their desire to communicate with the general public. And it really came at a good time when people want to know where their food is coming from. People are seeking that knowledge. So I think that's a pivotal reason that this became so successful. I had recently moved to Michigan from Wisconsin, where there they have dairy breakfast in June for Dairy Month as a way to show off their farm. So I partnered with several MSU educators with various backgrounds in our local Farm Bureau and produced this event that became very successful. Our goals that we came up with for Breakfast on the Farm was mainly to educate the public about modern farming, to educate legislators about farming and the importance of it, to engage the community in the event, the farm community mainly, not just dairy farmers, but to embrace all of agriculture, and to teach producers how to talk to the public. Some of these were more successful than others. Obviously, we've stuck with educating the public about modern farming. However, educating legislators has kind of taken a back seat because it was a lot of work and we didn't really have very many show up. So we had a special session and put a lot of work into it. I think we had 5 or 6 legislators, decision makers show up. So we've continued to invite those people, but not put as much work into it. And I want to talk about the last one as well, teaching other producers how to talk to the public. Since we used volunteers and primarily farmers, we did offer a training session the day before for those volunteers that were directly in contact with the guests, and just reminded them how we can talk to the public using simple terms, remember they're not from a farm, and how you could deal with activists or if problems arise, and that was very helpful. The first event that we had in 2009 was at Dutch Meadows Dairy in Fowler, Michigan, which is near Lansing. There we served 1,250 breakfasts, so we are guessing about 1,500 people or so came. So it was way more than we expected when we first started planning. In 2010, there were 4 Breakfast on the Farm events. The Clinton County one, again near Lansing, had about 2,500 visitors. Washtenaw County near Ann Arbor had 2,500 visitors. Isabella County is kind of near Mount Pleasant, and that was a beef and cash crop farm. That had 1,300 visitors. And then there's one this weekend in northern Michigan, Alpena County. So we'll see how that goes. The other 3 were all in the summertime, so on a Saturday morning. Again, I think we have a real opportunity to show people modern farm production in a positive light, and these numbers suggest that people are really interested, and we're at a time where the public is seeking out the background information about how their food is produced. Although each event is unique to the farm and the area that it was held in general, we have followed a similar pattern. The breakfast and the tour is free, although we've required a ticket. The tickets help us prepare for the crowd, so we have an idea how many we're expecting. We've consistently gotten 55 to 60% return on tickets, and we even had one rainy morning. We still got that. We've asked ticket vendors to keep tickets behind the counter so that people aren't coming and grabbing a large stack, since they're free, and throwing off the counts. Our most popular ticket venues have been family-oriented places like the library, ice cream shops, pizza shops, grocery stores. And then we've also placed them in the agricultural community at our farm credit services, our extension offices, some of the other vendors. Because it's important, although most of these were on a dairy farm, we want the crop farmers to come and the other livestock producers because we're all in this together and we can learn from each other. So far, each breakfast on the farm has chosen to have a self-guided tour so that people can go at their own pace. And the feedback that we heard from the guests is that they really appreciate that, especially the moms with pushing strollers, and some of the elderly guests that we get don't want to take the whole tour and want to move at their own pace. At the end of the events, we've surveyed people to get demographic information and to see what their attitudes towards farming are, if it changed, if the event had an impact on how they felt towards modern farm production, also what they learned, what they enjoyed most. We haven't got the data compiled yet this year, but it's pretty obvious that calves, usually we had calf feeding, taking a wagon ride, viewing and sitting in the equipment and honking the horns, and watching milking in the parlor were the most popular events. In 2009, when we had about 1,500 people, we surveyed about 150 people, and we found that 46% of them indicated it was their first time visiting a dairy farm. So there was a lot of people from towns and cities that came out to visit. We really strive to make each event educational, not just a visit for free food and ice cream and to see cute calves. Here are some examples of the signage that we used. Here would be the storage pond, talking about water collection and nutrients, and NRCS was at this particular event that we had there, talking about the lining. This farm was environmentally assured through the meat program. And then if you look in the middle there, here we've got this little cow, and that was to indicate to our guests that that was part of the kids quiz, and that was something that they really enjoyed. We gave kids a full test that had questions on it, like this one, the question probably asked, where was the water hauled to that was stored in these ponds? And then at the end, they got a prize. It was either a balloon or a cookbook or some kind of a little farm toy. And so that really promoted learning both by the parents and the kids. This is another educational display. This was Erlene the cow, made by a local dairy farmer, who shows off what she does in one day. You could see the feed that she eats in one day. Here's the water that she drinks in one day. All these are labeled. The milk that she gives in one day. And here's the manure or nutrients that she deposits in one day. And from that manure, if you apply it to the land, you can grow this much corn. So we tried to make that a whole cycle of not just manure isn't just an end product. A lot of work goes into these events. We found it to be successful. We have a committee of about 10 dedicated people, and they start planning about 6 months out, although our first one we planned in about 3 months, but that was a lot of work. We found it helpful to have someone spearhead in some of these areas. The educational signage, getting that 10-second message across, which also included a kids quiz. Kitchen, planning all the food, getting the food license. And then this year, and some of the events, we had a Michigan Farm Showcase where we invited other commodities and local farms to bring their product and educational information. Although these people are visiting a dairy, we wanted to embrace all of Michigan's agriculture and really show it off. So we had Michigan apples there. We had some goat farmers there. And I think we had the corn growers and the soybean growers, and we had some U-pick farms there, just explaining to people the value of our local agriculture and how important it really is to our community. We had somebody in charge of donations, which really depends in terms of money, and I don't want to throw a figure out there because it really depends how many people you have, what kind of farm you're working with. So probably $5,000 and up. How much work you want to do would be another thing. Volunteers, you're managing 100 to 200 volunteers for the day. Parking, about, if you're having 2,500 people, that's about 500 cars that you need to park in a 3-hour time period. Tickets is a big job, keeping them stocked in the different locations and making sure that they're moving. And then we had somebody working with marketing. Although we did hire that out to a vendor, you still needed to make sure that they're getting all the right information and putting out posters and flyers. We did hire this out to provide statewide consistency and create a brand, if you will. We want the consumer to know what they expect when they're attending a breakfast on the farm. So our marketing agreement included design of tickets, posters, flyers, T-shirts, to write media releases, the social media, which included Twitter, Facebook, Moms Like Me, those type of things, and then also our website. In most cases, we did not advertise on radio or take out newspaper advertisements because they were so popular already we couldn't handle any larger crowds. And some of, I think the one this weekend where it's in October in northern Michigan, they are doing some paid advertising, but for the most part, we have not done that. An important issue to address when having 2,000 people visit your dairy farm is biosecurity, even for the smallest visitors. We decided that having the general public does not pose a huge risk of disease transmission to cattle, but it is a great learning lesson to go through the whole biosecurity process. And people appreciated it afterwards. We posted a visitor policy, which you'll see on the next slide, an example. We asked every person if they'd been out of the country in the past 7 days and had a list of countries at risk for hoof and mouth. We did a sign-in, but we really didn't use that for anything. I suppose if we had gathered more information and there was a disease outbreak or something, we could have gone back and contacted people. But really, we just used it for curiosity of where people came from. And then we issued each person a pair of booties, and asked them to wear it when around the animals for the animals' health, and also kept their shoes clean. And the surprising thing was the kids really thought that was great. We did get more pushback from other farmers on wearing the booties, and really those are the people that we need to make sure we're wearing them. So here's an example of our visitor policy. It just says, please follow each of these steps before proceeding, sign in, wear the provided plastic boots when visiting cow and calf barns, follow the tour route and enter facilities at designated points. And then down below we say, if you'd like to see an area not on the tour, please ask for assistance. And the farms are wide open. We'd show you every part of it. Another important point was using hand sanitizer before eating. If you can get people to eat before they tour the animals, that's ideal, but they're going to do what they want. So dispose it in the garbage. If you've been out of the country in the past 7 days, talk to somebody before proceeding. And then just a statement that the health and the welfare of the dairy cows and the safety of the product is the highest priority. So please help us protect the cows, the milk, and you by following this policy. We want to make each Breakfast on the Farm event here in Michigan similar in quality, but unique to the farm and the area. So we got funds to help with providing high-quality events. We sought statewide sponsorships, and we got those from Dairy Farmers of America, Dairyland Seed, Greenstone Farm Credit, Michigan Milk Producers, Pioneer, and United Dairy Industry in Michigan to streamline a lot of the stuff to make the events easier for other counties and areas to put on. We hired out the marketing, as I said, to design tickets, flyers, posters, write the press releases, and handle that side of things. In addition, we purchased signboard for all events to share. We tried to make as much of the sign wording general so that too could be shared. Names and cow numbers and stuff could be inserted. We bought griddles, coolers, tents, things like that, and then we purchased a nice trailer to store these things in and to haul them to the next event. Currently, MSU Extension is finishing a redesign process, and the need for educating the public about agriculture has really taken a forefront. There's been 2 people in Extension dedicated to agricultural literacy full-time. Nancy Thalen is one of our ag literacy educators, and she'll be taking over the statewide Breakfast on the Farm efforts. So please feel free to contact either her or myself with any questions. And I just want to thank all of the farmers that have opened their farms to help consumers understand where their food is being produced at. And I think if we could take this proactive stance in showing people and getting them onto a farm, we can really make a difference in our community. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Faith. I think it's very important as we look to the future and educating the public and designing events that the public can attend to learn more about agriculture and what occurs on farms as more and more people are further removed from the farms in our communities. So thank you very much, Faith, for sharing with us that program, and hopefully people that are on this webinar and those that listen to the archives can glean some information from that and ways that they can incorporate programs in their states and their areas. The second speaker that we have on this program is Darin Mann. He is going to talk a little bit about how he educates his neighbors and relates to his neighbors as far as their operation. Both Darin and his father Ken have a dairy heifer operation in Idaho, and he's going to share some of his and his family's ways in which they interact with their community and their neighbors in their operation. And we'll give a few seconds. Oh, here we go. And with that, Darin, could you go ahead and share some comments that you have about how you interact with your community and your neighbors as far as from a producer standpoint?
Sure. And thank you for this opportunity, and good morning or good afternoon to wherever you might be. And I just want to thank Faith for her presentation and the good work that she's doing out there in the state of Michigan. Like was said, my name is Darin Mann, and I'm about 34 years old and married and got 4 kids. And I moved back to our family operation about 8 years ago, and have been able to work alongside my dad and to see it grow and progress. Backtrack a little bit, about 11 years ago, we raised about 1,100 head of heifers at any given time. And 11 years ago is when my grandfather passed away. And from when he passed away to when I came back in 2002, that 3-year period, my dad increased the size of the feedlot from 1,500 head to 5,000. And then when I came back in 2002, until now, we've increased it to about 12,000 head. So we've had 2 big growth spurts over the last 10 years. And in order to do this, we've had to have good relations with our neighbors and our county officials in order to be able to continue to expand. One of the things that is so important is your perception. How do people view you? And that perception is made up within the first few seconds of them coming onto your facility. And so the picture you see on the screen now, this is the office we actually just have recently completed. It looks like a 2-story red barn, but it's our office. And so, most people are now 97% of today's kids, I believe, are 2 generations removed from the farm, but their perception of a farm is a red barn. And so to make them feel comfortable and it looks nice and it's clean, we built a red barn upon arrival. So the first thing they see is that, and they get out, and hopefully they smell very little odor. You're looking at the road going up into the feedlot. And then we use this grassy area out here behind the office to entertain and field trips and to have barbecues and parties. One of the things that we'll get to in just a minute, actually it might be, excuse me for a minute. Slides aren't forwarding. They're moving, but I'm not clicking them. Okay, we'll start there. one of the things that we've done to be good neighbors is to make sure that we are environmentally good stewards of the land. And so that's the thing that's most important to our county officials and to our neighbors, is that this large feedlot next to them is pleasant and that it's not an environmental hazard. And so these are a few of the things that we've done in order to be friendly to our neighbors. All the roads around the feedlot, they are put down, we put like a dust control on them. It's made of a biodegradable tree sap, which controls dust. There's very little bit of dust that would ever leave the facility and then go to any of our neighbors. Then we put these signs up to remind them and the workers and visitors to drive slow. Also, our fuel tank storage, everything is very well secured, cemented around it, and there's a catch basin underneath that gravel road, so if anything did spill under there, that all petroleum products are secured and can't get into the groundwater. This one here, one of our neighbors gave a suggestion to us about 5 years ago, and what we used to do is we used to have a big hay grinder come out and it would grind up our hay, which would cause a lot of dust in the valley. And so we bought 3 new feed trucks, and they each have those large screws inside that will chop up the hay bales instead. And then we built this roofing system where the trucks get loaded, so what little bit of dust that comes off from that truck, it goes up and hits the roof of that building, that shed that it's under, and then falls back down to the ground. And so there's really no dust that leaves the facility anymore from feeding. These are just all suggestions that neighbors have given to us, and we've been happy to adopt them. And a lot of them we've just done proactively before anything's ever been said. Here's like a catch basin below one of our silage pits. Each one of them is lined with 2 feet of clay to protect groundwater. But it's something that when our neighbors see that, they feel comfortable and protected to know that their wells that are near the feedlot, or that we're looking out for them and trying to do the best we can to be good stewards of the land. There's a canal actually that goes through the middle of the feedlot, a stream that runs year-round. And so wherever we have a road that needs to cross over this canal, we've lined it with these concrete walls just so that nothing can ever get into the stream. And you can see on the road in the forefront how it's kind of darker, kind of a black color. That's that tree sap dust control that's been applied to the roads to control the dust. Here's a picture of that stream that goes through the feedlot, and you can see how close the corrals are actually to it. Each one of the pens there at the feedlot has a scrape alley where the cows stand and eat, and then those scrape alleys are cleaned twice a week, and then all the manure is stored into these concrete boxes, once again, so nothing can get down to the groundwater. And then we clean out those boxes every week as well, and all the manure goes out to make compost rows. And so we're constantly removing the wet manure, which contains the most odor from the corrals, on a weekly basis, putting it into compost rows, which also helps control flies, it controls odor, and in the hot, dusty months, summer, be removing a large amount of the manure from the corral on a weekly basis. It really helps control dust for the neighbors as well. We've also installed several of these sprinklers in every pen, so we run these sprinklers nonstop in the summer also to help control dust. In the last few years, we've changed out all of our water troughs in the feedlot and gone to, we used to have a continual flow where the water that the cows didn't drink would go into that stream that you saw earlier that passed through the feedlot. So now everything is on a float system, and we were using 7 wells to water the whole feedlot, but now that we've gone to this float system, we're only using 2 wells, so 5 of our wells are sitting idle at this time. This in the background is it's a park that we built here at the feedlot. That was actually the first thing that I did 8 years ago when I moved back. My dad and I built this park, and like I said, when I came back, we only had 5,000 cows at the time, and we knew that we wanted to expand. And so we built this park. It was on the outside of the feedlot. Now it's in the middle of the feedlot. But we asked that the county officials, the planning and zoning, DEQ, EPA, that when they had their meetings, talked about what they were going to recommend to the planning and zoning for our county, that they had their meetings out here at this park instead of in an office in some city. And as they sat here in this landscape park, they just kind of got the feeling that there's no environmental hazard here. It's landscaped, it's beautiful, there's no odor, there's very little flies, and they approved it. And there hasn't been any more CAFOs, either new CAFOs or expansions of CAFOs in our county, except ours in quite some time. Also at this park you see in the middle of the feedlot is where we will have all the neighbors that live within 2 miles of the feedlot. We invite them down every summer to have a barbecue. And just to tell them that we're grateful that they're our neighbors. We appreciate you. We realize that there's traffic on the roads. There can be some inconveniences with living close to a feedlot, but we recognize those, and we're grateful for you as our neighbors. And so they really appreciate that. We usually get about 130 to 140 people that come to that each year. At the bottom of each one of our corrals is large catch basins, and they have to be large enough to store wastewater for the 100-year storm. And so we made them 3 times that big, so we got plenty of capacity. And we do so because we have that stream that goes through the feedlot. Also, that stream that goes to the feedlot, about a quarter mile after it leaves the feedlot, it enters into the Snake River, which is a large waterway in the U.S. The trees that you're seeing in the background, that's the Fish and Game Wildlife Preserve. And so that's our neighbor that is about 60% of our border to the feedlot is the Fish and Game Wildlife Preserve. And so it's important that we're good stewards and have a good habitat for our neighbors next door. One thing that's real important to our neighbors is that the perception of manure trucks going up and down the road. And with 12,000 cows, it's quite a bit of waste. And so we started composting all of our manure here recently. Recently, I say in the last 5 years. But now we only land apply 2 to 3% of our manure anymore. The other 97% of it all goes into compost rows and is composted. There's been a lot of benefits for this environmentally and economically for us. Because no longer do we have to truck manure far distances away from the feedlot at a great expense. We now make the compost on site, and area farmers come and pick it up and then take it back to their farms that are quite some distance away from the feedlot. So we're also getting the nutrients spread geographically in a large area away from the facility. This is the compost turner that we use to aerate our rows. This is just an example of some of our compost rows. We have about 40 acres that are just in compost rows. They're turned weekly. And then once the compost is made, everything goes through a screener to separate all the rocks and the debris from the compost. And then lastly, this is the compost spreader that we use. As you've all seen manure trucks go down the field, they oftentimes dump a large quantity of nutrients in one location. These compost spreaders, they have the spinners on the back, and so it makes a real thin spread about 30 feet wide, and you can hardly even see it after it's gone over the field. And so if you were to have a storm or whatnot, this stuff is real easy to work into the soil, so you wouldn't get runoff into the waters of the U.S. by using this method. So it's been a great environmental improvement for us. Like I said, it allows us to clean our feedlot on a daily basis as opposed to whenever it's convenient that there's not a crop being planted from neighbor farmer or harvest. We don't have to work around those schedules anymore, so we can just compost 365 days a year. So it's really nice for us. In the wintertime, when we have a lot of liquid manure, though, we will store we will store it in these larger lagoons. And I went in and placed these concrete slides on the side of these ponds. Like I said, they're all lined with 2 feet of clay, but you can have considerable erosion by dumping large amounts of water into them. So I built these slides to protect the walls from eroding away. One of the things we've also done for our neighbors to make our place pleasant is around the farm we've planted well over 600 trees, and we probably have about 8 to 9 acres of landscape lawn that goes around the corrals as well. So, and then one of my goals is to not have a single weed growing anywhere on the facility as well. So we try to make it very pleasant for people as well. So we've all seen the facilities that have a lot of odor. They've got so many weeds that you can't even see the lagoon ponds. They've got a lot of stored old equipment in places. So we really try and keep it tidy and clean, because we do a lot of tours for our local community. Some of the tours that we've done over the past several years is I like to have 3rd and 4th graders come, and I get several busloads of them each year, and we talk about a lot of the same things that Faith already mentioned in her presentation. So just make them aware of where their food comes from. And it's not uncommon that a kid will ask a question, well, why do you have all these dairy cows? Because you can just buy milk at the store. So we know that we're hitting home and getting a message through to them. One of our biggest successes has actually been with our public officials in the legislature. 3 times over the last 8 years since I've been back, we've hosted the state legislature, the House, the Senate, and the governor, and we have a great attendance from them. And so that park that I showed you earlier in the middle of the feedlot, we'll cover that with a big white tent, linen tablecloth, candle lit. It's cheese and wine and filet mignon, and the comments you get are, this is so interesting eating a steak while looking at all these cows at the same time, or headlines in the paper the next day will be legislature visits odorless feedlot. And so it's good to get that recognition. And then years that the legislature doesn't come out, we have our local planning and zoning, county commissioners, and local mayors from municipalities in the area come and visit. So we just feel that it's important to get our message out that we are being good stewards of the land, that production agriculture is a great stability economically for the county and the state. The ripple effect of the dollars that the dairy industry contributes into our economy is enormous in our state, to make sure that they see the benefits of the dairy industry. Most importantly, we try to send that message home to moms, because as we know, moms do most of the shopping, and we want them to feel comfortable and safe with the food they're purchasing. So that's why we have their kids come out and we teach those kids. And then another group that I have come out on a regular basis is the actual teachers themselves. During the summertime when they're not in school, I'll usually get 4 or 5 busloads of teachers a summer ag in the classroom, and we can educate these teachers about production agriculture and kind of correct some of their misunderstandings, because as we know, each one of those teachers goes back to a classroom of 20 kids, and then they get another 20 kids the next year and 20 kids the next year. And so if we can teach them what real life modern day agriculture is like, and to make them realize that even though we're a large operation, that we're still a family farm, they can then help spread our message that we're trying to get across. A couple other things I just want to bring to your attention that we do for our neighbors. This picture was just taken recently, and you can see to the right, the cornfield, you can see the outside 6 rows. It's shorter, and it's all dead now, but the outside 6 rows of all of our cornfields throughout the valley, we plant to sweet corn, and that's for all the neighbors to come and take all they want. So it's just a way of saying thank you, and we recognize you as our neighbor. And like I said, we have them down for a barbecue each year. And then also I have a day in the fall and then a day in the spring where each one of them can bring their truck or trailer and come down and get all the compost they want to take back to their gardens or yards. And so it's so important. And like I said, my grandpa's been here since 1947, and to this point we've never had a public complaint filed against our operation. So it just takes a little bit of effort and education, and taking the time to educate the public and and we've already seen it pay big dividends for us as we've been able to continue to grow and expand, and also as we've been able to have good relations with our neighbors. One other thing I wanted to mention is 4-H and FFA. Each year in our area, they have their county fair where they sell their heifers. Each winter, I take their heifers for them and house them. I don't think any kid wants to feed their cows during Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's anyway, so we take them all for them for a few months, and we put them into our breeding program. We get all the animals bred for them. It's pretty hard for an individual who's got one cow to find that cow in heat on that specific day, so we take care of that for the kids and then help them along in their project. And another thing that we stress when kids come out to the farm or the feedlot is farm safety, to talk to them about these waterways and canals, and to be aware of those farm equipment and slow-moving vehicles on the roads, and wear bike helmets and things like that, because kids are our future, and it's important that we take care of them, but more importantly that we educate them, because at the end of the day, they're the buyers of our products, and so it's important that we teach them that we are raising a safe and wholesome food supply in a proper manner. So with that, I thank you for your time and look forward to your questions later on.
Thank you very much, Darin. A lot of good information there of how to really engage the community and get them involved in agriculture and understand what is actually going on there. Our third component of the improving public perception of dairy farms is use of social media. I think we really understand how social media plays an important role in communication and getting information out there, and how times have changed quite a bit and how we actually get information. And to talk about how we reach out through social media and how that's been used in programs, we have Andy Kleinschmidt to talk a little bit about how he has integrated this into reaching out to the community in Ohio as far as various issues that are out there. And Andy is an extension educator and faculty member there at Ohio State University. The Ohio State University. I've been taught by my colleagues that it has to have the in front of there. His goals are to conduct agricultural research and crop production and developing curriculum to disseminate these research findings and continue to increase the agronomic productivity of farmers and agricultural clients. But he has a very keen interest in the use of social media, and that's what we asked him to talk about today, how he's used social media to get information out to the public so that they can make an informed decision regarding various issues. And with that, Andy?
All right, thank you very much. Wonderful presentations from both Faith and Darin. Very informative, great information. I really picked up on a theme that I think Darin was threading throughout his presentation, that perception is reality, in that perception is that the facility is run down and weeds are everywhere, then the reality is that facility must be poorly run, which is not always the case, of course. But Darin takes all that guesswork out by keeping just an amazing-looking facility, and perception is, of course, it's a well-run and really wonderful presentation. Okay, let me back up here. I may back up. I want to provide an overview of social media, and in I think I'm having the same challenge that Darin was having. The slides were moving a bit faster, possibly, than. But I want to provide an overview of social media. I'll give some relevant examples of impact, and then I'll discuss a little bit of a strategy. And I'll just assume, for the sake of presentation, that everyone's starting from scratch on social media, but get my slides in the right spot here. Social media is I've gathered and learned from a lot of folks in ag chat circles and many other circles, that everyone really does now have a role in sharing news, observations, research and innovation. And I think what I'm impressed so much with regards to social media is there really is such a low technical and expense requirement. That is, there are some wonderful examples of folks doing social media that, up until a few months ago, and I'm wondering, can I get a little help on my slides here? My slides seem to be running off on their own. Up until a few months ago, I know that there were several folks that were doing a lot with social media and just using flip phones, not any kind of smartphone, and certainly not any kind of high-end computer technology. So there really is a very low technical requirement, but there is a social requirement to make this work, and that's probably the biggest part of putting the time into it to get the social requirement. But we have this huge capacity. Of course, Facebook and Twitter are just huge. I have certainly had a very strong bias over the years to blogs. I have run one blog, and I've developed another blogaggregator for the university, and I'm just blown away with the amount of impact that you're able to leverage with a blog. And ultimately, this affects anybody in the world that has a message to get out, and obviously that includes dairy producers, anyone involved in agriculture that wants to get a message out. And I think it was Faith, at the beginning of her presentation, she remarked when she asked her clientele what exactly they wanted her to do, and her response, I believe, was they want her to kind of tell the truth about what really happens on a dairy operation, on a livestock farm. And of course, there is a great opportunity to do that on the farm, but another great opportunity to do that is online, because there are a lot of people that are telling a story about your dairy operation or livestock operation that may or may not be giving the best information. So I think it's important that we all play a role in telling a story about what really happens on the farm. So I'm going to go through a couple of examples of Facebook, blogging, even the YouTube account of some folks that I just have pulled out. One of the very first folks I was connected with was several years ago, was a lady by the name of Barbara Martin. She is based in California, has a dairy farm with her husband, and she has done a wonderful job pulling some things out and sharing great information. And I'll just pull up my pointer here, and you can see this this first clip here about how safe is your milk supply. And we're not going to click on that, but you know, this is just a great example that she is able to share with the 600, 700, 800 people that have liked her Facebook page, to really put the reality in terms of milk production and the safety, the food safety involved in milk production, the food safety aspect from a dairy producer's point of view, not having to rely on an intermediary to tell the story, or maybe somebody else to tell the story of milk safety that may have a different agenda. And to go along with the Facebook page, Barbara has a very, very well done blog, Dairy Goddess's blog, and Barbara does a wonderful job, not just sharing textually the information about her farm, but also she does an incredible job of integrating YouTube clips and a lot of visual media, a lot of pictures and other things, which of course the eye is drawn to. So she's able to tell the story via the text entry, but also video and pictures. So telling the story about what goes on her farm. But what I like about Barbara is she extends beyond just the happenings of her farm. She really does a wonderful job of also talking about some issues in the dairy industry in general, and issues that deal with food safety and dairy safety. This is probably the best example of a YouTube channel I have seen. This is Will Gilmer's channel, and Will has just done just an incredible job. I think the very first clip I saw of Will Gilmer was the YouTube clip was the dairy, I think it was Darrin Poo or something, and it's just amazing. He's singing as he's applying manure. He's singing a song about dairy production and poo, and talking about how he's handling the poo and how he's handling this manure to provide nutrients back to the crop and do it in an environmentally responsible way. And he does it in song, and it's just an amazing channel. And I know he's got thousands of views and hundreds of subscribers to his YouTube channel. So Barbara and Will are just two of so many examples of individuals that have taken different channels of social media, called them their own, and have really leveraged these large social networks now to tell the story about what is going on in dairy and really shatter the misperceptions that may be out there to provide a reality. So the impact, the straightforward impact would be, for example, on Barbara Martin's Facebook page. You've got hundreds and possibly you can get thousands of people to like your farm and then share and disseminate information about your farm or the dairy industry or whatever industry it is that you're in. And a blog, I think I still am very, very biased towards the power of a blog. Literally hundreds of page views a day. I didn't chat with Barbara prior to this presentation, so I'm not sure what her traffic is like on her blog. But I run a blog. It's a very crop-focused blog, and it's I think 300 unique viewers a day, and I wouldn't be surprised if Barbara's were that many as well. And those are 300 individuals a day that you have a chance to influence, to share, to tell the story that becomes harder to do one-on-one or face-to-face or with small group. You can really impact and really leverage your message tremendously through these online tools. And then YouTube, just looking at Will Gilmer, my goodness, he had thousands and thousands of views. I want to say it was maybe tens of thousands of views on his video collection. Just really, really done an amazing job. So again, these are opportunities that if Will were to talk to everyone in his community, he would probably not have that same impact by putting up a YouTube clip and really having beyond just a local impact, but really a regional and even national impact about dairy production and what really goes on in a dairy farm. I know there were, just as I want a side note here, there were some issues in Ohio with issue called Ohio Issue 2, which had to do with the creation of a livestock care standards board. And I used some of Will's YouTube clips and posted them on my Twitter page just to show, dairy production and the reality of what goes on in dairy production. It was a very, very fine job. I had a chance to meet a gentleman by the name of Manny Karthik probably 2 years ago now, maybe 3 years ago. We've been friends. I have not met him in person, but met him online, and Manny and I have been chatting ever since. And he said something to me in a telephone conversation. He said, you have a lot of people that they set up a Twitter, a Facebook, a YouTube, and a blog, and they wait for the magic to happen. And of course, this is a complete failure, and they get frustrated, and they say that these tools are just not of any value. And I think it's important that there is a strategy in place, and just setting up a Twitter or Facebook, YouTube, et cetera, and so forth, and waiting for traffic to come to you, or waiting for good things to happen, or waiting to be featured on CNN or NBC, as some of these other folks have been, it's not going to happen. There is some work that is required, and I'll give a little bit of insight to a strategy. This is just showing a very, very generalized strategy where you would have two main circles of influence. One might be Twitter, one might be Facebook, or perhaps both. And then you can feed those social streams with several options. You can feed them with a blog, and here's just WordPress, and that's one example of many blogging platforms. You can feed them with a slide share. If you're doing PowerPoint presentations and you're in a position where you're having to do a lot of PowerPoint presentations, you can feed those presentations to your social circles. Your Scribd, if you're finding articles that come across your email inbox that you want to share in a PDF format, this is a very, very handy way to share those articles. There are many other examples, of course. YouTube. Amplify is a really good one that I used quite a bit for a while, where you read from a web page and you just click a button and you share that web page. Posterous is really almost an instant blogging platform. But these are some examples of how you share and you're pushing that information towards your social circles. Now, what I probably should have done with this is I probably should have put a couple of smaller arrows, maybe a small arrow from Facebook down here and a small arrow from Twitter down here, because there is some back and forth. But for the most part, you might be using a blog, SlideShare, a Scribd, a YouTube as your main feed to push out to these social circles and share. There are some wonderful, wonderful resources for more information than what I was able to cover here in 10 minutes. I would say, first and foremost, the National E-Extension Initiative. I think, though, you're going to find most of the value under number 2 right now, and that would be the archived recordings, because there is some early work done. Kevin Gamble is a name that you'll see throughout those archived recordings of how-tos of blogging, how-tos of Twittering, setting up a Facebook page, managing a Facebook page, and you'll really find all that under number 2, the archived recordings of the E-Extension professional development, and these are simply find what you'd like, click on the link, and most of the archived recordings are probably 30 to 45 minutes. Another wonderful resource that is fully extension-based would be Ann Adrian, and I have used, and I know many other folks in Extension and even outside Extension have used Ann Adrian. I'd say Google Ann. She's got SlideShare, a blog, Twitter. She's really good about sharing the latest and greatest tools for sharing things on social circles. And then finally, Michelle Payne-Knoper with AgChat. AgChat is a website there, as you can see, agchat.org, but also on Tuesday evenings from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, there is a 2-hour agricultural live chat on Twitter. And this was Michelle developed this, she founded it, and now what I like about AgChat is it's branched out from a 2-hour, once-a-week live Twitter discussion to now they also offer training. In fact, they just finished up a training for farmers here in Chicago a few months ago, and the training was focused on Twitter, Facebook, blogging, YouTube, and it was mostly, I think the participants were, Michelle told me that 70 or 80% of participants were farmers. So this is taught by farmers, geared towards farmers. So a great resource for more information on really expanding the social network and telling the story about your farm or the industry. And I think with that, I'll go ahead and end my presentation there. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to open it up for questions and answers. Obviously, to have your questions, please type those in the chat box there, and then we can actually use those to ask the speakers their various questions that have come through. One question that we had is, will there be access to the PowerPoint files after this webinar? The two presenters, both Faith and Andy, their presentations are loaded to the web already in SlideShare, and so you will be able to access them. And within a day, you will actually find the links for those. If you don't want to do a search in SlideShare, the actual links will be through Dairy XNet. So we will actually have those available there. Also, within a day or two, we will actually have the archived version available. So if you have colleagues that you think would like to listen to it, it will be available there also. We take our questions now and look a little bit at our questions. First of all, for Andy, one of the questions that has been asked is, how do you attract people to your page? What is some of the key points to getting people to come and view your blog and various other social media that you utilize?
Well, I will say, I'll break the question in a couple parts. One would be attracting people to a blog, and another would be attracting people to perhaps like a Facebook page. For the blog, when I started my blog a couple of years ago, I did very, very little to let anyone know that I had a blog. But I found that if the content was good and the blog was updated on a regular basis, and I did enough to fill out the tags and share tags and put things into decent categories, that I found rapidly that traffic started to build upon itself through search engine optimization. And I'll give a perfect example of this. In November of 2009, Ohio was going through the Ohio Issue 2 to try to vote in a Ohio Livestock Care Standards Board. I put in an article from Dr. Brian Rowe on my blog with his permission about this Issue 2. I tagged it well. I made sure it was in the proper categories. And for about 2 or 3 weeks prior to the election of this Ohio Issue 2, if you typed in Ohio Issue 2 into Google or Issue 2 Ohio into Google, my blog was the number 1 or number 2 resource that came up. And I think the same can apply, and the same is applied to a lot of different topics that I've spoken about. So if you're writing good content and it's done on a regular basis, I think you'll find that traffic will definitely build over time. I went from obviously no traffic to 300 plus unique visitors a day. So that would apply to a blog. Now, with regards to a Facebook page, what I would recommend is create the Facebook page. I don't recommend purchasing ads. I don't think you need to spend any money on these things other than your human capital, the time required to do this. Create the Facebook page, and then through your social circles, whether it's email, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, whatever social circle you've developed, ask your friends and colleagues to that have a shared interest to like your page, and you'll find the same thing will apply, that you'll have people slowly start to like your page, and you'll start off with maybe 20 people liking your page, and a year or so you might have 1,000 or 2,000 people that have liked your Facebook page. So I'd recommend no ads. I'd recommend instead of spending money on the ads, I'd recommend putting out good content, research-based content, and setting a schedule to do that. And you can use Google Calendar to give you reminders that once a week, it's time to put an article up there, or share something. I think weekly would be at the minimum is what I would try to shoot for to update a Facebook page or a blog.
Thank you, Andy. For those of you that are having trouble with the link that's in the center of the screen, we have it in the chat box, and you can actually click on that and get to the survey that way also. So if you please take a few minutes and do that, we greatly appreciate it. Darrin, there's a couple questions a little bit about your operation. Basically, one person asked, how many employees do you have, and more importantly, how do you get them to buy into your philosophy and your goals?
I currently have 13 employees, so basically only 1 per 1,000 cows. So it's a pretty efficiently run operation. We are looking at expanding and adding another 10,000. Right now, I get the calves when they're about 6 months old, weigh about 400 pounds, and I take them up to when they're springers prior to freshening. But we'd like to add a 10,000 head calf ranch in addition to it. So calf ranch is going to be closer to probably 5 people per 1,000 cows, so I might be adding close to 50, 60 employees here in the next year or two. But to get them to buy into it, one thing, I hold the upper hand. I have their paycheck, and so one of the things they have to do is kind of what they're told to do. But I do, and what I ask for them is to just take care of what they do. It's too big to worry about what everyone else is doing, and so I just ask them to clean up after themselves. I have a full-time gardener who basically takes care of the weeding and the mowing the lawns. All they have to do is keep clean their portion of what their job description is. But like with all people, who doesn't like to work in a clean environment? None of us like to work in a filthy, cluttered, dirty environment. So it also boosts good morale to have, they take pride in it, and they like to bring their families out on the weekends. And when their family comes in town to visit, they always like to bring them out and show them where they work, because it is a little bit different and unique than most places. You wouldn't see that many trees and landscape lawn and parks and ponds and everything else. So it's a fun place for them to bring their families to.
Mm-hmm. And I think you answered the other question that was in the chat. Basically, you do live in Idaho, and you are not exempt for CAFO regulations.
Right. Anything over, I think, 999 head, you have to comply with all CAFO regulations.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question for Faith. Obviously, you talked about this one program. You've seen this program expand throughout the state, and what do you see in the future with this program?
Well, in 2011, we already have 4 breakfasts planned and several others in counties considering. So I see more and more picking it up as long as there's support from the agricultural community to put these on. Since they are free, it takes quite a bit of capital and volunteers. And I see really just continuing trying to connect the consumer and the producer. And maybe that will get saturated sometime, but I don't think any time in the future. We had a couple people, visitors this year, that said they went to 2 or 3 of them. So right now, consumers can't get enough.
Mm-hmm. There was one other question on if the PowerPoints will be available on E-Extension website. What we will do is through Dairy XNet, under the archive webinars, we will actually put the link to the SlideShare site. So that will come within the next day or two as soon as we get the recording downloaded here, and we can actually load it to the E-Extension website. So that will be available through Dairy XNet. The archive webinar section, it will be available there. If there are no other questions, I'd like to go ahead and conclude our session and thank everyone for attending. Thank you very much.